The great suppression is upon us. Feds confirm Hunter Biden's emails are real. Trump walks out on a 60 Minutes interview, and a struggling bar owner who's actually a wealthy Biden fan. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, my friends. Great to have you here. Less than 2 weeks, getting down to the wire. Ooh, gonna be a close one. It's gonna be tight. It's gonna be tough. Get ready for it. But today there's such a calm. If you look around the news cycle, there's really not a whole lot of big blaring headlines about much of anything. It's almost like we're in the middle of August in a non-election year. For the day, this could change at any moment. Even though you have COVID still rampaging through the country, not the way that the libs say it is, but it is still out there, and it is still a challenge. The lockdowns continuing to be a hold on our economy, and a presidential election less than 2 weeks away. Pelosi negotiating in bad faith over a stimulus or a rescue, I should say, bill for people because of the COVID lockdowns. And yet today, if you take a look around, you'd find, well, hold on, why isn't there really more noticeable news to talk about? How could this be? Well, there's a reason for it, friends. We are in the great suppression campaign of 2020, right? You know about the Great Depression economically. This is the great suppression. They're doing everything that they can to hold off on the Hunter Biden avalanche. They're just trying to keep it back a little bit longer, because what else are they going to do? They've already thrown their October surprises at Trump. They've already tried. They had the BS story in the Atlantic about how Trump thinks troops are losers. I mean, no person who has any brains really believed that. But, there are all these different stories they've tried and it hasn't worked. But the Hunter Biden story is a big problem for the media because they went all in their efforts to make sure nobody knew anything about it, that it was fake, that it was Russian disinformation. And you can just feel it's not working. It's not working because there's more. And now, as of yesterday, we can tell you that there's at least reporting from high-level sources in the FBI and the DOJ that, yes, the FBI has the Hunter Biden laptop. And yes, it is in fact the case that the DOJ and the FBI agree with the DNI's statement, Ratcliffe's statement earlier. Now, there's no evidence whatsoever for Russian disinformation here. Doesn't exist. So people like Adam Schiff, who are going out there claiming there's Russian disinformation, they're presenting a completely speculative theory offered in bad faith, and hoping nobody pays attention to the fact that they have no evidence, no support for it whatsoever. Nothing. Zero. It's not working. The story is now out. People are seeing what really happened here. And I do think that there's some portion of the media that's concerned that the Joe Biden piece of this may solidify. It's one thing for Hunter Biden to be this really obviously wounded, corrupt, but really also sad ne'er-do-well. That's one thing. It's another thing for Joe Biden to be directly benefiting from and using his position as part of that corrupt scheme. And this is exactly what the president is saying about it. That's the president's claim. That actually could really matter to voters. On the one hand, we just need to know the truth because we should. We should be a society that operates in the realm of facts and honesty and decency when we talk about our politics, our politicians, and we need to know what's real and what's not. But that's the first layer of getting the truth out about Hunter Biden. There's another layer where it's the media can't be trusted at all, and you know this. They have no ethics. They have no decency. I mean, even people that I know who are on the fence often about trashing the entire mainstream media, but who are center right, they will admit now, we've never seen anything like this. I mean, this is true banana republic, authoritarian, third world, state media stuff. fascinatingly enough, it's state media in favor of the state that they want to bring into being instead of the regime that already is in power. But that's what we're facing. That is what we are seeing right now. They don't care that you can look and understand right away that they're partisans and they've been lying to you this whole time. They're building up credibility with their own side. This is now a loyalty test. You see, if you're a journalist in America, the loyalty test is, are you willing to sacrifice your dignity, your intelligence, your professionalism in pursuit of advancing Biden to the Oval Office? That's the loyalty test that 95% of the media is going through right now. And they're all succeeding insofar as they're willing to do all those things as long as it helps Joe Biden. Because they know that if he wins for 4 years at least, whoever ends up being the real president, whether Joe steps down after a couple of years and Kamala takes over, or maybe it's even sooner than a couple of years, whoever it may be, they will have a Democrat administration that will give them access that they can all cheer for, and they'll be oh so happy while they feel like their side, their team is in charge again. And this is very important to liberals in particular who take their politics and internalize it to the point where they really believe that rooting for Democrats makes them better, smarter, more empathetic people. So an administration, a Biden administration coming into power at this point would help them on personal and professional levels. And that's why they're willing to do the things that you've seen. Unprecedented suppression campaign from the mainstream media. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And big tech also put itself in a very precarious position, because now we know when it really matters on a critical issue, if they feel like they can put their thumb on the scale for the left, for the Democrat, Twitter and Facebook will do it. Even with no real rationalization or justification, they will go to the mat for the Democrat. So that means that now Republicans have to look more seriously at how are they regulated? Why aren't they treated like other media companies are treated? Why do they have this Section 230 protection? They're not just a highway for ideas and information. Right? They got a lot of traffic cops on that highway, and they only pull over Republicans. So I have to tell you, I think what we're seeing right now is a media that's in a little bit of a quiet panic because they can't stop, as much as they tried, the Hunter Biden story. They can't shut all of this down. And they don't have anything to offer in their all-out assault on Trump that they haven't already been trying, not just during this election cycle, but for years. It's not going to sway anyone at the last minute. I think they recognize that at some level. You know, talking about Russia and whatever else they're throwing at Trump now. Remember, what was it, a month ago? The obsession was about Trump and not condemning white supremacy. You know, Trump is a white supremacist because his words don't come out quickly enough when he says that he condemns white supremacy or something like that. He doesn't scream from the top of his lungs when asked. You know, he just says, I condemn white supremacy. No, you must scream it, sir. So they've changed these narratives. They've done everything they can. And Trump can still win this thing. And they know it. Just imagine what the country would be like if we had an evenly matched media, if we had platforms on the right that were as well-funded and well-established as those on the left, as many of them, and we were able to really go toe-to-toe with them, you know, go cannon for cannon, so to speak, with the other side. I don't think you'd have a Democrat win a national election for decades. The media gives them at least a 5 to 10 point boost over what they would have if there was some parity. I'm not saying if the right dominated all media the way the left does. I'm just saying if there was some parity. But there's not. Instead, what we have are Republicans that have to go into debates where they know the moderator, as will be the case tomorrow, the moderator is effectively a Democrat activist. And you only have to make some small changes. Think about it like a referee in a sporting event. If a referee is biased, you know, all you have to do is give that one bogus pass interference call, right? All you have to do is call That one time, call out the the offsides or whatever it may be to change the final outcome. And in debates, it's not hard if somebody wants to make sure that, one, they're sending a signal to all their peers and their buddies, don't worry, we all know I'm a Biden person. And two, if they want to make sure that the Biden candidacy can come out and have some credibility of saying that they did a better job, it's very easy. You just have to skew it a little bit. You just have to move the goalposts just a bit to help out your guy, Joe Biden. That's what's going to happen tomorrow night. And we just accept this. We admit this. And I got to tell you, it reminds me of what I've been saying here for months when we talk about it. And it was great because Rush Limbaugh himself, you'll recall, read every single word of this Twitter thread on, this was back in June. He read every single word of it on his radio show. And as we sit here and the media is quiet because they don't have a good enough assault strategy on Trump for the moment, I wanted to share with you, again, what my thoughts were. And remember, Rush himself, the greatest ever radio host, thought that this needed to be read to his entire audience word for word. If one of the already vilified conservative billionaires out there has any stomach for saving their country from the mob, they should buy and flip a major media platform or fund a new one and make it an unsinkable aircraft carrier of true free speech. We are completely outgunned in the platform wars, and it's only going to get worse. All the major social media and streaming content companies are part of the lib Death Star. Stop sending checks to think tanks that overpay second-tier scholars to churn out policy papers that 5 people read. It doesn't even have to be conservative in its mission. It just needs to become dominated by conservatives. Oh, rather, it would soon become dominated by conservatives if it adamantly refused to censor speech for the woke mob. The left can no longer tolerate debate like sane people, but they don't have to. They just point, scream, and cancel. Meanwhile, I know ultra-wealthy conservatives who are terrified of anyone finding out what their politics are, because to be accepted among the elites, you have to at least allow those around you to believe you're woke and lib. This is a massive cultural failing of the right. And where are the older leaders in conservative media building up the next generation? Folks on our side seem obsessed with their own brands and protecting their turf, which is a small slice of the media landscape. We need more voices with serious platforms we control. That was in June, and it goes on from there. Doesn't that seem like it's pretty timely considering what's gone on with the media and social media in the last month or so? Well, all during the campaign, but we're outgunned. They've got more platforms. They've got more ships at sea, and we're just hoping that our superior seamanship will defeat them. Maybe. But wouldn't it be nice if this were the last election where we had to sit here and say, sure, they dominate all of Hollywood, all of the news media, all of academia. Sure, they have all that. I might say all, 95% of it. But wouldn't it be nice if that was this is the last election we had to go through that? Because if there was any fair effort to tell the American people what's really going on from those who make a living trafficking in information, President Trump would be up 7 to 10 points on Joe Biden right now, everywhere that counts. I really believe that. I think the difference here is our corrupt, disgusting, disdainful media. They are the worst. And we have to find a way to beat them. We can't keep allowing this dominance to continue. That's why I was so appreciative, again, when Rush read that on his show, such an endorsement of it from the greatest radio host out there. It just was a reminder for everybody else. This is what we need to do. This has to be the future. We have to build our own battleships. I got a crash course in home title theft recently. You better pray this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially. Here's what happens. The legal title to your home, guess what? It's online. It's in the cloud, stored on servers. The cyber thieves find your home's title, then forge your signature on it using a quitclaim deed, and then they take out loans against the equity for your home. You often don't find out about this until you're left in debt, start receiving payment notices, or maybe even a foreclosure notice. You're not going to know about it until those collection calls start. Insurance and common identity theft programs do not protect you. You need the experts with Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. Use the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also check online at that site to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection.
The emergence of these emails, texts, and videos that were supposedly left on a laptop in Delaware, a really fishy story. Whether that was actually the product of a foreign intelligence operation, and obviously Russia would be the chief suspect there. Look, there are so many questions about the provenance of this material. A lot of it does look legitimate. There are pictures of Hunter Biden, there are videos, there are emails, but we have no idea, and neither does the New York Post, whether any of it was doctored or forged or faked, and that's why the mainstream news media has declined to really touch this story because it just lacks credibility. And the fact that it appeared in the New York Post and that they chose to report on it extensively sort of says a lot about where we are in 2020 as opposed to 2016, when a lot of news organizations reported on emails that had been hacked by the Russians, democratic emails, and then leaked, and they were newsworthy and people reported on them. We're in a much different situation now because we now know that Russian disinformation or foreign disinformation or even campaign disinformation period is as dangerous to our democracy as anything exposed in these emails.
What a jackass. I know you probably heard too much from that guy. That's Ken Delanian at MSNBC, who was a huge proponent of the entirely fraudulent Russia collusion hoax, as was Rachel Maddow, who has suffered no consequences. In fact, her ratings during that just kept going up and up. She's never apologized for perpetuating a journalistic fraud, for the massive journalistic malpractice she engaged in and all that. But she's not a journalist. She's an opinion person. But even opinion people need to be factual. That's why if I get something wrong, producer Mark or, somebody will come on the air and tell me, hey, or they'll shoot me an email and say, hey, you got that one wrong. So it's important. You got to have your facts straight. Ken Delanian has none of his facts straight. Doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. Total nonsense. We need to come up with a term for this because this has become a commonplace tactic of the left. When something is obvious and obviously true and common sense means that it all lines up, it's completely credible, there's tons of evidence for it, but they do this, well, there's a lot of questions out there, so many more questions than answers. In fact, really, we have no information. We just have questions. I mean, this is a complete sleight of hand. It's a trick. It's dishonest, right? It's just a way of lying about what's really going on to people. But that's what they do. There are questions about the provenance of this. Let's talk about Russia. What are the questions exactly? We have a signed receipt in Hunter Biden's handwriting for the laptop in Delaware. There are intimate photos, not just photos, not like stuff that they took off of Instagram, photos that don't exist anywhere else of Hunter Biden. They're not fake. They're on the laptop. The emails, all, if you're running this kind of a disinformation operation, if you were really doing that, very difficult to replicate all the kind of emails that you would expect to be on a Hunter Biden laptop from the outside. What the Russians know all of his contacts. They know his writing style. The whole thing, it's so crazy. It's like saying that Joe Biden is not really running for president. There's a space alien who's a lizard with a Joe Biden suit on top who's running for president. That's what the MSNBC security analyst here, this guy's a moron. That's the level of absurdity they've gone to. But no one has a problem with this on the left because they're desperate right now. I got to get access to whatever the Democrat listserv is or the email list or whatever, where they all get their assigned talking points from the DNC, because I would just love to see exactly how they manage to convince so many people who are supposed to think that mortgaging or selling out their own intellectual credibility, I mean, looking like total bozos all the time, is the price you have to pay now for being a Democrat. I mean, you have to be so subservient. You have to be such a little toady, a little quisling.
You have to be a little Brian Stelter over at CNN. Whatever Jeff tells me, I'll say. I hate Fox News.
That's what you got to do. So he's one of many. He's really an archetype. He's really the quintessential version of the toadying leftist, the throne-shining lib that will say whatever he has to say. No intellectual honesty, no journalistic integrity whatsoever. But there's so many of them. And you have here, I've never even heard of this guy before. Florida State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg. He's getting in on this too. Maybe he wants to, get a promotion in a Biden administration. Play 8.
The president is taking a page from the desperation chapter of the dictator's playbook. His other October surprises have not worked. The Durham report still hasn't come out. It's not going to come out till after the election. The investigation into the unmasking and spying of his campaign has been a big nothing burger. Hunter Biden's laptop, that whole thing has been fizzling. It looks like it's tied to Vladimir Putin in Moscow. So he's stuck. And so that's why this all sounds eerily familiar. Barbara's right. This is what we saw with the president of Ukraine, where he's demanding an announcement of an investigation because he knows the power of that. Even though it got him impeached, he knows that that's how he got elected in 2016.
I don't even know what that guy thinks. He thinks he's saying, but he sounds like a complete moron. But let's understand this. At this stage, with a desperate Biden campaign that is running a weak candidate who is too old for the job, who has been unimpressive as a legislator for decades, who was a non-event VP chosen by Obama because, they just needed somebody from inside the system who wasn't going to make too much noise or be too annoying. So in that sense, I guess he sufficed. But now it's a question of stupidity as fealty. You have to go out there. If you're a Democrat, if you're going to be a good little soldier for the DNC, you got to go out there and say things that you must know at some level make you look like a moron. You have to. And in fact, the dumber you're willing to sound, the more extreme you're willing to be in your denunciations of this as Russian propaganda and tying this to Vladimir Putin. Well, why not just say that this is an FSB or an SVR operation? Why not just tell everybody that that's it? Why not go the extra mile? Trump is actually a Russian asset. Oh, well, they've already said that. How could they make this more extreme? Oh, Rudy Giuliani's a Russian asset. I heard that one recently, too. These people will defame anyone. I mean, if you think Rudy Giuliani is an asset of the Russian government, you're not an intelligent human being. But remember, there are the people that are too dumb to understand what the lies are, which a lot of Democrats. And then there are the people that are willing to embrace a stupid lie because it advances their position and makes getting a position in the Biden administration, a senior position, more likely. I always say this, and people get mad at me. They go, "Oh, Buck, don't say anything good about the other side. Don't say anything good about the other team." The left takes care of its fighters. The left takes care of people that even Tubin. I mean, I've avoided, because I know a lot of you have kids who listen to the show, and I always want you to know your 8-year-old, your 10-year-old, they'll always be safe listening to everything the Buck Sexton show. You might have to explain a little bit to them afterwards, but nothing that would be inappropriate or you'd say, "Uh-oh, I can't have them listen to that." So I've avoided a lot of the Tubin jokes that I would otherwise like to make. But one reason why I don't have I can tell you this: if Tubin were a conservative, for whatever reason, they'd be trying to say that he should have, sex crime charges pushed against him, that it was indecent exposure on purpose. That's true. No one's even mentioned that. And by the way, I don't think that should happen to anybody. But I'm just telling you the difference in the media approach. You're going to see this. Jeffrey Tubin is, it's embarrassing. And, I mean, we don't have to get into it, but he certainly got into it. Sorry. I mean, come on. I can't. But he's already a millionaire. He's already got these very privileged sinecures at places like the New Yorker on CNN. He's going to come back, and it's going to be fine. Anderson Cooper will bow and genuflect when Toobin comes on to talk about his legal analysis. What are the worst legal analysts on TV? Just says stuff all the time that's not true, that's not intelligent, but it's exactly what the Democrat left wants to hear, right? It's what the Upper West Side and, in New York City and Kalorama in D.C. and Santa Monica and Beverly Hills in California, it's what they want to hear. And Toobin provides. And, of course, all those counties around D.C. where all the rich people who, why are they rich again? Oh, yeah, that's right, proximity to government. That's where they live. So, but Toobin will be fine. They take care of their own. Do you know what Peter Strzok is doing right now? A lot of you say, Buck, he should be in prison. Right. Do you know where he is? Teaching at Georgetown University. Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You know what James Comey's doing? Counting his millions from his book deal and tour and speaking events. And yeah. You know what General Flynn is doing? Still trying to get out of a farcical, unjust, evil, corrupt prosecution. You see the trend, friends? You see what happens? Just wait until I'm here telling you about, it's the Biden administration. And now Buck Sexton is having his first really thorough IRS deep dive into everything I've ever done for the last 7 years day. That's going to happen at some point. I'm ready for it. The good news is I'm very good at crossing my T's and dotting my I's. But it doesn't matter who you are. If the IRS wants to make things miserable for you, they can. And Democrats, like Bill Clinton, as we all know, love using the IRS against their enemies. Oh, I'm sorry. Like Barack Obama, too. Lois Lerner, sure. She was the only one who was going after groups that said, Patriot or Tea Party or anything like that were nonprofits. It was just Lois Lerner's own initiative. Yeah, sure. This is like when the mafia boss, I never gave the order. Yeah, you never gave the order because you tell everybody things whispered in your ear in the back of a restaurant that you sweep for bugs every day. We all know what's really going on. We all know who was really giving that order to go after the Tea Party. It wasn't Lois Lerner on her own, folks. But what a look. If you're just judging the other side by the effectiveness of its ruthless moves, Democrats have a lot to teach us. Democrats don't care that they ran this Russia playbook the last time around. They're doing it again. Doesn't matter that it's obvious to anybody how fraudulent this whole thing is, how unfair, how unethical. As far as they're concerned, the more unethical, the better. It shows resolve. It shows zealotry, dedication. If you want to be a good little leftist, you better be a part of the revolution, friends, or else you're a counter-revolutionary. And counter-revolutionaries do not have good outcomes when the left takes over. That's another part of this. I do believe if Joe Biden wins this election, there will be consequences for a lot of us. I think that there will be an effort to use social media platforms to silence even more. I do believe we're going to reach a point where all of the tweets worth reading will say sensitive content warning on them. Those will be the only ones you want to read, because everything else is just the echo chamber propaganda of the left. It's all the same stuff. And I think people, naturally, we'd like to believe that there's a state of balance in our politics and a state of balance in our media. It's not true. It's not true. In a lot of countries, you have one-party rule. In a lot of countries around the world that are supposedly, free and open or relatively free and open, you really have one ideology that completely dominates the public discussion, and anybody who dissents from it is ridiculed and ostracized and shut down. So we are an anomaly in this regard. The fact that we're even really trying, and that our two-party system represents people on both sides of very different ideas. There are big separations. I'm glad we don't have. Usually there are people that try to get attention for themselves during an election by saying both parties are the same. There's no difference. And this is supposed to be really edgy thinking. No, that's not true. Both parties are not the same. They suffer from some of the same structural shortcomings, but those are also just human failings. It's like saying, well, people are greedy and lie and don't do right. That's always going to be true. But if you're looking at what the parties represent and what they want to accomplish, there's some enormous differences. There's the difference, for one, and I found this so fascinating. I pointed this out, what was it, just yesterday, that of all the things that Trump gets credit for, there's one that I think it's so interesting. You know, he hasn't started a war in 4 years. He's the first president in decades for whom that is true. And the media just doesn't care. You never hear about this. The anti-war left doesn't care, never gets a mention from them. Their opposition to war was apparently political, not ethical. You know, I shared that online on Twitter a day or two ago, and it went very viral because I think it is such an overlooked point in all of this. I'm somebody who has grown up. I mean, my entire adult life essentially has just been a series of American wars and occupations. Trump is the first president to stop that. And they said he was going to go to war with Iran. They said he was going to go to war with North Korea. It's not true. We have results. This is about facts. This is not about perception. We did not go to war with any of these countries. He started pushing back on China for its illicit trade practices and all of the scheming and undermining of our economy and the theft of intellectual property that China does. We were told, oh, well, that might lead to a war. No, it hasn't. What it's led to is the Chinese government, finally the Chinese Communist Party, being put on notice. There's a new sheriff in town. Now, they don't like that sheriff, but that's because he's defending the defenseless farmers, i.e. the American people, who are left to the rapacious mercantilism of the Chinese Communist Party's trade policies. Not anymore. Well, that's all changed. In fact, foreign policy, where the president also has peace deals in the Middle East, not done by decades of previous attempts, by other presidents of both parties. The president on foreign policy, it's really one of his areas of biggest success, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal, for example. I mean, they say pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord is a bad idea. That whole thing is a joke. It's just all a big global virtue signaling bacchanal. Oh, yeah, they're all going to hold themselves to account for their carbon emissions. Nobody really believes that. No one really takes that seriously. Countries aren't going to make themselves, objectively, countries are not going to make themselves poorer. Certainly large companies that think they have a big growth in their future because of climate change. That's not going to happen. But the president hasn't started new wars, and yet that's never talked about. And perhaps because I not only come from a generation that's been fighting wars, but I was in war zones. I remember what it was like to feel the first pulse from a distance of a car bomb going off. I remember the first sirens blaring to let me know, incoming, run for your life. There are mortar rounds falling around you. I remember visiting a friend of mine, a dear friend in Walter Reed, because one of those mortar rounds almost sheared off his leg. He barely lived. And I remember seeing the body count coming in of Iraqis, of Americans, day in and day out as I was working the Iraq desk at the CIA, and then being in country and hearing the gun battles and gunfire, being in a Black Hawk when they started lighting it up with 240 Gulf machine guns because they either thought there was something on the ground or they were doing target practice. I never even asked. I just remember being on that Black Hawk and thinking, oh, well, now we're in a war zone and there are machine guns firing all around me. This is an interesting circumstance. When you've been around that kind of stuff, when you've seen it and when you've seen the faces, I remember another friend of mine who I had just seen. I was supposed to go to a meeting with them, and he was SF. He was Special Forces, and I was going to accompany them to a meeting with a source, and I couldn't go because helicopter schedule change. I was taking a helo, so I had to, because I was hitching a ride on a military bird, and so I don't get to tell them where the bird's coming and going. And I missed that meeting, and the next day he ended up with his team taking down an HVT on the way to the meeting and got hit with a suicide vest and ball bearings. I remember seeing him. He lifted the patches off as he was hobbling around the military base where we met up later, and he had perfectly little cylindrical holes from where the ball bearings went in. And he was fine, God bless. He was okay. None of his team were seriously wounded. They got some ball bearings, but they were far enough that none of them died. And I remember seeing this and being around this as just a civilian CIA analyst in country and then in Afghanistan later on. And we're not doing that to our guys again. We're not doing that. And that's a big deal. Because a lot of people came home missing arms and legs, severely burned. A lot of people came home with PTSD. And That's something that a commander-in-chief has to live with forever. This president has been doing everything he can to make sure that we have as few of those situations as possible. It's an enormous positive because we don't need to be fighting a war. We don't need to fight a war with Iran. We don't need to fight a war with China. We don't need to do this. We don't need to topple a government in Libya. And you would think that people would care more, especially in the media, about this. But no. Their opposition to war was never ethical, never moral. It was political. It was a cudgel, a weapon to attack Republicans. This is just a quick one, but there's a Biden ad that I think got pulled off of YouTube of this guy who's in Michigan, and he's blaming Trump for the shutdown. Not Gretchen Whitmer, who's been like a shutdown maniac, but no, he's blaming Trump. It's all Trump's fault, of course. And he's just a struggling bar owner, man. He's just a guy, just a working man, somebody that other Michiganders and people across the country can relate to. Until it comes out that he donated $5,000 to Joe Biden this past summer, and he's actually an angel investor, and he's rich, and the bar is like a fun side project for him. And this is who the Biden campaign makes an ad about to show how much they care about the working man and the working people. What could be a more perfect description of Democrats than that? Yeah, man, we just care about hardworking bar owners who are actually Silicon Valley-tied angel investors who write Joe Biden $5,000 checks to his campaign.